Shugden Community, which is a not-for-profit organisation registered in the United States. Tonight I want to explain a little bit about the history of this issue and why we're demonstrating and how we hope to resolve the situation. I've only got 10 minutes and quite a lot to say, so I'm afraid I'm going to be quite direct and possibly a little blunt. Sorry about that, please bear with me. Also, I'd like to make quite clear that we're not here to argue. We very much want to move towards a resolution to this issue. We have tried to establish a dialogue on this with the Dalai Lama and his representatives for nearly 20 years. So even though they're not here, maybe this is a step in that direction, who knows? So as you'll be aware, we hold the Dalai Lama responsible for the discrimination experienced by Shugden Buddhists. We believe he is the source of this problem and the only one able to solve it. So by demonstrating, we're asking the Dalai Lama to change. So I presume everyone here knows that during the demonstrations, we asked the Dalai Lama to stop lying and give religious freedom. And I want to explain why we say those things. So when we say stop lying, what are the lies that we are referring to? So specifically we're referring to things the Dalai Lama said in the speech that instigated the ban on the worship of the enlightened deity Dorje Shugden and that caused the social exclusion of Shugden Buddhism. So I'll talk about the ban more in a moment. In that specific speech in spring 1996, he said that people worshipping Shugden harms his life, harms Tibetan people, harms Tibetan independence. So you can read the Kashag statement, May 31st, 1996. It's available on the Dalai Lama's own website, his approved translation of it. So it says, the essence of His Holiness's advice is this: propitiating Dorje does great harm to the cause of Tibet. It also imperils the life of the Dalai Lama. Now in this statement, the cause of Tibet refers to restoring the freedom of their country. So this statement by the Dalai Lama is at the root of the discrimination Shugden Buddhists have endured for the past 20 years. So I question whether any reasonable person could really believe that the reason the Chinese invaded Tibet is because of some people praying to Dorje Shugden. I would question whether any reasonable person could really believe that the reason the Chinese continue to occupy Tibet is because of some people praying to Dorje Shugden. And I don't think any reasonable person really believes the Dalai Lama's life is in danger if people continue to follow their teacher's advice by praying to Dorje Shugden. So I would say none of these statements are true, and when we say stop lying, these are the statements we're referring to. The Dalai Lama saying these things is completely irresponsible. They are so obviously inflammatory, it would be impossible to say anything more emotive to a refugee community desperate to return to their homeland. With this speech, from one day to the next, he turned Shugden Buddhists from valued members of the community into pariahs, into traitors, into enemies of the state. The social exclusion that followed from this was entirely predictable, and sadly, the Dalai Lama has done nothing to stop this. Immediately after this speech, the private office of the Dalai Lama communicated his words throughout the Tibetan community, and within weeks, letters were pouring in from charitable organizations supposedly working for the welfare of all Tibetans, saying that they had purged their membership of any Shugden worshippers and in future would not allow any Shugden worshippers in their organizations. So again, I brought lots of letters, but there's one on the Dalai Lama's own website with his own approved translation, so I'll quote from that. It's from the Tibetan Youth Congress resolution. I'll read out points 8 and 9. So point 8, if anyone in the Youth Congress membership is found as still worshipping Dorje, that member will be immediately expelled from the Tibetan Youth Congress membership. And 9, this Congress will also urge all other Tibetan organizations not to enroll anyone into their membership who venerates and worships Dorje. So that is clear discrimination on the basis of religion. It is published on the Dalai Lama's own website. It's still there, you can check it tonight if you like. Has he said even one word to stop this discrimination? So out of blind faith in the Dalai Lama, believing what he said to be literally true, non-Shugden practitioners got extremely angry with Shugden Buddhists and tried to force them to give up their faith, or tried to force them out of the Tibetan community. Statues and shrines were destroyed, people were threatened and publicly humiliated, refused basic services like treatment in medical clinics and service in shops. So this obviously leads to the other thing that we chant, which is give religious freedom. So I'd like to quote from the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Intolerance and Discrimination based on Religion or Belief. So this says, no one shall be subject to coercion which would impair his freedom to have a religion or belief of his choice. No one shall be subject to discrimination by any state, institution, group of persons, or person on grounds of religion or other beliefs. Discrimination between human beings on grounds of religion or belief constitutes an affront to human dignity and a disavowal of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, and shall be condemned as a violation of the human rights and fundamental freedoms proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The ostracism of Shugden Buddhists that began with the Dalai Lama's speech in 1996 intensified in 2008 when he instigated a vote to completely segregate the monastic communities. This vote was mirrored in the lay community, and Shugden Buddhists were made outcasts from their community. Monks, nuns, and lay people took oaths not to have any spiritual or material relationship with Shugden Buddhists. French journalists who documented this called it apartheid in Buddhist land. Some of the Dalai Lama supporters say that Shugden Buddhists do have religious freedom because no one is stopping them practice. However, Shugden Buddhists know that if they practice openly, they'll be immediately branded an enemy of the Dalai Lama, a traitor to the Tibetan cause, that they will face financial ruin because their shops will be boycotted, that they face social exclusion, that their parents, partners, or children may sever all ties with them because they believe that in doing so they are fulfilling the Dalai Lama's wishes. So I think that's very clear that that is not the religious freedom the United Nations Declaration is calling for. The Dalai Lama has exerted as much pressure, as much coercion on them as he possibly can, from the initial emotional blackmail of saying, unless you give up your prayers, I will die, through to convincing his supporters that it is Shugden Buddhists' fault that Tibet isn't free, through to standing idly by while Tibetan society is completely segregated in his name. This is behaviour that would be unacceptable from any ordinary politician, let alone the most famous Buddhist monk in the world. I mentioned the ban on Dorje Shugden worship earlier on, so even today, some people question whether there is a ban. So again, I'd like to quote from the Dalai Lama's own website. This is his own approved translations. So from point 6 of the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies, this is the resolution June 96, again, it's online now, you can check it. It says, in forbidding the propitiation of Shugden, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is following the intention of Guru lineage. So that sentence seems to me to have a subject, a verb, an object. The subject is His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, the verb is forbidding, the object is the propitiation of Shugden. So also from DalaiLama.com, the Tibetan Youth Congress resolution, point 7, says, together with documents pertaining to this ban on the worship of Dorje, this Congress will urge, and so forth. So if there isn't a ban on Dorje Shugden, what is this resolution referring to? Again, remember, you can read this on his own website. Okay, so another argument some people present is that the existence of Shugden and Serpong monasteries shows that there is no ban in the Tibetan community. In fact, since the segregation of the monasteries, although they are geographically within the Tibetan community, spiritually, socially, and materially, they have been completely separated. Some people say they have their own separate monasteries, but separate is not equal, and they are treated as outcasts, not allowed into libraries, health clinics, shops, and temples that are open to the non-Shugden monks. They are not allowed to make offerings to non-Shugden monasteries or shrines, take part in the traditional religious ceremonies, and the non-Shugden people are not allowed to support them. So to resolve this issue, we would request everyone, especially those of you who care about the Dalai Lama's image and reputation, to ask the Dalai Lama to accept the following 4 points. To allow anyone who wishes to practice Dorje Shugden the freedom to do so, to stop completely the discrimination against Shugden practitioners, to allow all Shugden monks and nuns who have been expelled to return to their monasteries and nunneries, and to receive the same material and spiritual rights as non-Shugden practitioners, to write to Tibetan communities throughout the world telling them that they should apply practically the above 3 points. So the moment this happens, all our demonstrations will finish. I don't think any of those requests are unreasonable. We simply want these people to have genuine and complete religious freedom. If that happens, all of our protesting is finished. So I was billed, that's my speech, I was billed to talk on a different topic. I hope you weren't disappointed that I changed it. If you are interested, we have plenty of these leaflets. Retting Lama, How He Chose the False Dalai Lama, that has the essential points of the talk that I was billed to be giving. This felt a little bit more meaningful in the context. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
everybody. And I'm here to talk on this issue from a personal level. I'm not representing any institutions, any individuals, rather than myself. I think that should be made very clear. Also, the points that I'm going to raise are my own personal views. Now, my first point is this. This protector called Shugden has never been Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings and his institutions' protector. And that's my first point I'm going to make. And the second point I'm going to make is, since beginning of this protector, sometime 18th century, always caused problem in the community, in the society. And it's up to now, that's why we are here. And if there's time, then I will make a little bit point, a short point, who are the people behind this so-called, the international Shugden community. And I want to make that point if I have time. So Lama Tsongkhapa and his two principal disciples, Dorje and Dorje, wrote 38 volumes of teachings. 38. None of these volumes of teachings mention this Shugden issue, let alone introducing how to practice it. This Shugden issue comes after 230-something years after Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Institutions are well established. So there's no ground to claim this Shugden is Tsongkhapa's traditions, what you call the protector. Doesn't need Tsongkhapa's tradition, doesn't need extra protector, because Tsongkhapa and his followers already introduced 3 Dharma protectors: Kalarupa, Vaishamana, Mahakala 6 hours. So that's something, my first reason why this protector is not Tsongkhapa's, never been Tsongkhapa's protector. My second point is this. From Tsongkhapa up to present time, there are 102 what we call Ganden Tiba, the holder of the Tsongkhapa's throne, and we have that. None of them claimed, promote this protector as a Tsongkhapa's traditions, institutions, protector, and that should be said very clearly. 101 Ganden Tiba who lives in Paris. Some of the international Shugden community, they claim he practices. That might be his personal level, but he never ever claimed that he is Gelugpa's institutions protector. In fact, before he became Ganden Tiba, sometime 2002 or 3, he went to see His Holiness, saying, from now on I will not practice. And His Holiness and himself, in front of him, more than 200,000 people in Bodh Gaya publicly announced this Longrin Namgyal, who is going to be the next Ganden Tiba, that's the 101. He promised me from now on I'm not going to practice. Now if he's practicing now, because he finished his term, that's up to his personal level. I will not argue with that. Another point I want to make is many Tibetan great, not non-Gelugpa traditions practitioners, many Gelugpa traditions practitioners, before Pabongka Rinpoche's and Chijang Rinpoche, and during Pabongka Rinpoche's and Chijang Rinpoche's, strongly reject, strongly argue, worshipping this spirit is something useful or meaningful. If you look at Ganden Tiba, 54th Ganden Tiba Ngawang Shugden, sometime around 18th century, he not just reject, but he asked some of the people who are worshipping this protector in Ganden Monastery in Tibet, he asked them to take those possessions outside the Ganden Monastery's boundary. That's the fact. So there are many, not just the 5th Dalai Lama, not just the 8th Dalai Lama, not just the 13th Dalai Lama, many others, such as Pujo Ngawang Champa, such as Yungzin Yeshe Gyaltsen, such as Tugen Tridi Nyima, such as Ngurchu Dhammapada, they all, such as 8th Panchen Lama, Tembe Wangchuk, they all strongly reject. So that is the fact. I want to make the first point, that this protector never been Gelug's protector or Tsongkhapa tradition's protector. Now my second point I want to make is, since beginning of this what you call the Shugden, always controversial. Its starting point is controversial because this guy called Takwa Tenzin, somebody calls he was killed forcefully, somebody calls he was got some kind of illness. Anyway, he was died when he was 37 or 36 years old. That is the starting point of this spirit. That's the starting point. So why it's controversial? And in the middle, when it went to Sadhya master have a great difficulty to accepting him to come. Okay? And there were many controversials. During the Pabongka Rinpoche's time, as our chair briefly touched on, what had happened in the eastern Tibet, so many unhappiness or cause. Just name of this spirit. And now we are here. Name of this spirit, 3 monks were killed in Dharamsala, not long time ago, just a few years ago, in a cold blood, killed 3 monks. Many people are beaten out of the name of this protector. So it is not healthy protector. Somebody claim it is some kind of very amazing, healthy. It is not. Very, very controversial, and culturally, socially, religiously cause so much divisive. So, and actually, himself, when he went to Sadhya to ask, take me to as your protector, this Sadhya master, called in his vision, clear vision, Sadhya master said, who are you? And this spirit said, I am the divisive spirit from Gandhi. That's what he said. And this is well documented in Sadhya masters, if you want to read. And that's third point I want to make. Now, briefly, my next point is this. This so-called ISC, International Shugden Community, who is behind that? It is clearly, it seems for me, NKT, Neo-Kadamba tradition, is behind all these movements. They started called Western Shugden Society, sometime in 1996 or 7, then called Shugden Support Society, or something like that, as something I can't remember clearly. Then also now they use this term, ISC. Or if you look at people who are there demonstrating, I would say quite sure, if not 90%, 80% are from NKT. And what the earlier speaker said, we want to say that, sorry.
I'm going to have to ask you to take a seat.
That's fine.
Thank you very much.
So I'm not going to. I'm going to tell a story. Let's keep it a little simple there, because do I know what side I'm on here? No, I probably don't. I first came across Dorje Shugden when I was doing my doctoral work in Ladakh in 1993. If you don't know where Ladakh is, here's a map of India. The little square up here is the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and Ladakh is an area of India that abuts onto the Tibetan plateau. And since 1842, when it came under the Maharaja of Kashmir, has been effectively speaking part of what is now modern India. So it's a bit of Tibet that is part of India. It's important to note in that sense that for a couple of hundred years, it was not under the jurisdiction of Lhasa. Okay, it's not traditionally under the jurisdiction of the Dalai Lamas, and it's an area which nonetheless is very important, particularly to the diaspora of Tibetan Buddhists, because it is a crucial area in which Tibetan Buddhism has flourished and maintained itself for 1,000 years, largely uninterrupted by Chinese invasion or anything of that nature. Yes, next slide. The work that I did, initially rather naively, I went and did my PhD. I wanted to write a book about a Tibetan monastery and how they work. I'm an anthropologist. What we do when we do that is we go to a place, we dig in, we ask lots of favours, and we stay put for, in my case, 1.5 years. And I lived in this monastery here. I shan't name it because we won't go there. But you know, if you read my book about it, you'll know where it is. If you read my most recent article that you can find on the web, then you know you'll know all of this. But I don't want to get bogged in down those particular details. This is a Gelugpa monastery. It belongs to Ngayar Rinpoche. It is part of a series of monasteries that belong to Ngayar Rinpoche, who's the Dalai Lama's younger brother, that are in Ladakh. As you can see, it's in a rural area. At this point in time, it was 7 days walk from the nearest road. Rather unhappily, it's now 4 hours walk from the nearest road, which is a shame. It's a Gelugpa monastery. It was founded by Changsen Sherab Sangpo a little after Tsongkhapa. And they extraordinarily kindly put me up for 6 months while I stayed and studied their rituals and did all of those things. A crucial part of this, next slide, well, I'll say a crucial part. A part of this was the fact that it was a Gelugpa monastery in 1994 that had Dorje Shugden as a worldly protector. Now, I'm going to say that bit here because that's an important, crucial distinction. From the NKT's perspective, Dorje Shugden is a wisdom Buddha. Okay? From the Daki's perspective, he's what's called a Jigtenpela, a worldly deity. He hasn't achieved enlightenment. But those two things often go together, and they are kind of put together under that word, Dorje Shugden, and I don't want to get bogged down in the theology of that, because that would go on forever. He was a very high-ranking protector, and regularly possessed a Ladakhi oracle, I shan't give his name, let's not go there, who was an army man who became regularly possessed from about the age of in his late 20s, and there was a very long process of choosing him and finding out who he was being possessed by, and what he did in this case was he was seen as being possessed episodically by either Dorje Shugden or by his minister, Kache Mapo. And he would, as you can see, kind of wear the appropriate robes and everything on those lines. Because Dr. Gyaltsen was famously and theoretically either died at his own hands or was murdered by having prayer scarves stuffed down his throat, the oracle went into possession by garroting himself with prayer scarves. It is, I must admit, particularly this possession here, which is the first one I ever witnessed of many, and I interviewed the oracle and everything. It's a terrifying thing to see. When someone goes into full possession, this gentleman, it looks like every bone in his body dislocates at once. It is deeply persuasive in a physical way that something is happening that, as an anthropologist, we don't understand yet, and we should probably get on with that. Shugden was one of 11 protectors of this monastery. He was one of 2 worldly protectors. The other one was a local god called Shachoksa. And I think it's important to note that. We stand at the moment, and particularly in Britain, in a situation that says the world is divided into people that follow the Dalai Lama and people that are Shugdenpas. This lot here would never call themselves Shugdenpas. They would say, we have a worldly protector for our monastery, and we have 2. And both of them are possessed by oracles, and often those 2 oracles will go into possession together. In that sense, and they would sit there and say, who's the protector? They would say, a real one, you know, maybe Vajraparada, you know, maybe Mahakala, you know, maybe one of the other 11. But if you said, are you a Shugden worshipper? They would go, that doesn't make sense to them. In particular, if you ask them, they would say, this is a worldly deity, and therefore it is a Rokspa. It is a helper. One of the things they say in Ladakh is Lama Yoga. The Lama is higher than the gods. It's a very common saying. The Lama is higher than the gods. And in that sense, they wouldn't kind of define themselves in those terms. They also regularly, I hasten to add, put the Dalai Lama and Shugden together. They understood that the Dalai Lama had strong views on the matter, but they had a monastic protector. They followed the Dalai Lama. Monlam Chenmo in 1993, for example, they brought out a big photograph of the Dalai Lama. Everyone in the village prostrated before it, and prostrated before the tormas, which included the tormas, the sort of votive offerings, which included a torma to Shugden, and the Shugden oracle was there. These things went together. So our present state of deep polarization that occurs, particularly from the British perspective, is not one that is shared by Ladakhis. They didn't think about it that way. Now, next slide. Ladakh was an area of proselytization that began to become influenced by the politics that surrounded Shugden in Dharamsala and many of the refugee communities. This is Dagon Rinpoche. Those of you who know this area will know that name. This is him arriving to... Actually, he did arrive to give various teachings on a variety of things, such as the 13 Vajrabhairavas and a variety of things, including Shugden. This is him arriving in the village here. Just to give you a sense of, if you're not used to this, this is him, this is his handout, this is everyone in the village receiving a blessing. Ladies first. And he was there to, in some sense or other, strengthen Shugden practice, or the use of Shugden as a protector in Ladakh in the 1990s, and that was certainly occurring. Now, we get to 1995 and 6. Can I have the next slide? Oh, not that one. One of those. Go back. I will stay there. We'll stay there.
Or I could skip to ahead if you want.
No, that's all right. Let's stay where we are. I'll come back to that last slide in which I'll give an opinion. What was the effect of the Dalai Lama's teachings in 1996 on this community? Okay. Now this is important for when we discuss those things about is it a ban, is it not a ban, all of those kinds of things. The first thing was when the Dalai Lama made his announcement, I was busy writing up my PhD, which you've read. Oh, really? Okay, I'll have to be quick then. And about a few months later, the abbot and several of the other monks made the journey to Leh to phone me up in my office in Edinburgh where I was doing my PhD and said, can you not say anything about Shugden? Get rid of him. But if you say we've got him, we'll have him forever in that book. And so I had to remove 12,000 words of my thesis, which is what we do in my job because we protect our informants. They have subsequently got rid of it, and they allow me to actually say these things, so that's all right. But when I went in 1997, and I asked around about this, and I asked a lot of people about this, the first thing they said, and I think this is a crucial kind of point, the first thing they said was, we wish the Shugden supporters community would be quiet. Now, sorry to say that. I'm going to be blunt. You were blunt earlier, so that's fine in your excellent speech.
This one.
Okay.
Sit down.
Oh, right. Can I for 30 seconds go to the next slide? Done. All right.
I will leave aside the issue of the origin of Shugden worship, because this is a field which I'm not a specialist on. And I also do no excursion in the thorny and slippery and foggy field of theology like you avoid to do, because they're stretchable and dangerous. And again, I'm not a specialist. But I concentrate instead on patterns, sociological and political and religious sociological patterns, which is what I'm dealing with mainly. Instead of discussing fact, I'm trying to figure out what, in the different chapters of the history of Shugden worship since the 5th Dalai Lama, what was particularly obvious or particularly has been regarded as a problem. Well, you have to see that I think you come to two concepts. That is the concept of elitism and of divisiveness as opposed to inclusiveness. The dispute seems to have started with the 5th Dalai Lama adopting mainly, there's several issues, but one of the main issues that the 5th Dalai Lama adopted for the state of Tibet are rituals and deities, I don't go into details, which actually belong to other schools of Tibetan Buddhism, in particular Nyingma school. And there were people among the Gelugpa who had become the strongest school, at least in central Tibet, who were bluntly refusing that in their own writing, because they saw their tradition as being the pure tradition, and hence it would not be right to adopt deities and practice from other schools. What happened after the death of 5th Dalai Lama and his regent Sangye Gyatso is actually, there are many people who pretend it is very clear, actually it's not clear at all. How should then practice become a widespread feature of Gelugpa school? Because it has become that. It had become that. It's not entirely clear. Partly because, to a large extent, because it left not so many traces in scriptures. A lot of that is oral transmission. And a lot of things which existed at that time, we don't know anymore because there are not much evidence. We have a lot of things on indirect evidence. Right. Yes. But what we know for sure is that at the beginning of the 20th century, we have the following situation. We have a situation in which Shugden worship has become rather the rule than the exception among the Gelugpa school. Prayers are recited regularly, which make a clear distinction between the Gelugpa tradition and other traditions. We have most of regions of Tibet who are clearly Shugden followers. This is very important politically because in that time there are not many Dalai Lamas. I mean, they were there, but most of them died very young for various reasons. And hence, the Dalai Lamas were not mostly not government, but regions. There always has been a stronghold of Shugden worship in eastern Tibet among Khampas. And the sociological reason for that are very clear. At the contrary of central Tibet, where Gelugpa school is clearly dominant and there is no way around it, in eastern Tibet the situation is more complex. The Gelugpa monasteries are very big and very strong, but there are more pockets surrounded by non-Gelugpas. And hence, you can see why the need is stronger, or is felt stronger, not at least strong as such, to have something which makes a difference between Gelug and other schools. An important episode in Tibetan history regarding the Shugden is the relationship between the two monasteries of Sera and Drepung. I will leave it alone aside this situation in Ganden because that is very complex and actually not very well researched as far as I can see. If somebody knows better, please consult with me. First, Sera has a stronger link to Eastern Tibet, and Second, Sera has a stronger link to Beijing, to the Qing court, Qing Manchu court, and also to Tashilongpo, where also the Shugden practice is very strong. So we have here a kind of axis which is, it is moving, nothing is black and white. Reality is always grey, but you have the usual suspected, I don't mean in pejorative sense, but you know, always these kind of patterns recurring. There are exceptions, but you have this link between Beijing and Lhasa. You have Sera, you have Tashilongpo, you have Eastern Tibet, the Kampas, the Gelug Kampas, and you have Shugden. And always the circle of the Shugden worshipper separate themselves, make the difference between themselves. This seems to be the essence between themselves and the non-Gelug person. Which, from the point of view, might be right. I'm not criticizing that as such. But I think it is important if you want to understand the situation from a sociological and political point of view. Then we have the chapter of Pabongka Rinpoche. Pabongka Rinpoche has been universally recognized as one of the greatest Tibetan scholars. There is no doubt about that. He's recognized also outside the European school as such, but also very strong, very, very strong in recent century, definitely the strongest, the tract of Shugden, and the tract of Gelug supremacy. It is a little bit, there's a discussion as to how important this role really was. There are people now who say, who tend to be anti-Shugden, and who say actually he has really introduced it. I personally don't agree with that, but as I said, more research needs to be done on that. Important for our pattern which we are looking at is that we have to do again with a highly revered person, but somebody who will make a strong opposition between Gelugpa and non-Gelugpa, and easily drop the option. Then we have in the 20th century the tensions with Tashilongpo, the Sera crisis in 1947. Again, Shugden plays a role in that. Comes exile. In the early years of exile, the Dharamsala establishment is clearly in the hands of Gelugpa, Central Tibetans, and Shugden followers. There are also Eastern Tibetans Kampas, I do not deny that. Not a large number, but they are there. Some are very important. But they all are Shugden followers. People who are not devoted to Shugden and don't belong to the leadership. And this has changed, of course, during the 70s and during the 80s. Partly, to a large extent, because of the Dalai Lama himself. Then there are other factors that play the role. New Generation, Tibetan Youth Congress, which was at that time a very important and very big organization. And politics became more participative during maybe the 80s. And I've left 1 minute and 50 seconds, 50 seconds, which is not much. The last chapter of divisiveness, to make a small jump, was some years ago, 6-7 years ago, when there was a big decision struggle in the monasteries in South India, where the Dalai Lama and people following him, to my observation, a very, very large majority, proposed that Shugden worship still be practiced in the monasteries, in the big monasteries, and they were asked to leave, to go and create their own monastery, which finally, after a lot of struggles, happened. So again, we have to do with clear separation between Shugden and non-Shugden. I will leave aside one point that I wanted to make about the three current groups. One, which appears to be important, is that there are roughly three main Shugden groups nowadays. We speak about Shugden, the Shugden path. Actually, it's not such a unified word. There's one faction which is around mainly today, the monk in India who calls himself Kundalini Rinpoche. There's Nkati and Kesan Gyatso. And there's Gamchen Lama. I've mainly encountered Gangchen Lama. Gangchen Lama is close to the Beijing function. Gangchen Lama is supporting the construction of Shugden statues in different monasteries in Tibet. He was behind the intronization of Gonzalo Dorje, which has been published very much in the last couple of weeks.
Hi Terry, I'm going to have to ask you.
I'm finished.
Brilliant.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
He banned this mainstream Buddhist practice. Since then, to the present day, the Tibetan population worldwide has been divided by this ban. And the Buddhist world is also divided because of this ban. This ban has caused continuous persecution and immense suffering. Before the ban, Tibetans lived together harmoniously, both Shugden practitioners and non-Shugden practitioners, like brothers and sisters, happily sharing monasteries, shops, hospitals and schools. Now they have been forced to separate, and the peace, trust and harmony have been destroyed. Since the ban and its enforcement by the Dalai Lama's supporters, Shugden practitioners have been forced to choose. Either sign an oath to give up the practice of Dorje Shugden, or suffer loss of human rights, persecution and violence. Monks refusing to sign the oath were expelled from their monasteries. In 1 month alone, February 2008, 900 Shugden monks were expelled from their monastery. People who refused to sign the oath are ostracized or expelled from their communities. They are denied basic human rights. Shugden practitioners are banned from entering shops, restaurants and hospitals. Whole communities are segregated. Families have been divided. Tibetan government employers were sent letters saying that if they did not give up their practice of Dorje Shugden, they would have to resign their jobs. The harm caused by this ban extends far and wide, beyond the Tibetan community. 3 years ago, a lawyer requested me to help a poor Shugden practitioner from Mongolia who was seeking asylum in the UK. While he had been a monk in Mongolia, he had suffered false imprisonment and terrible abuse and torture for his refusal to abandon his practice of Dorje Shugden. After escaping from Mongolia, while living in London, he had been badly beaten up in Paddington by fanatical Mongolian supporters of the Dalai Lama. At our first meeting, he kept asking me to prove that I was a Dorje Shugden practitioner, because he was terrified of being persecuted by supporters of the Dalai Lama. He had lost everything. He understood clearly that the source of all his unnecessary suffering was the Dalai Lama, whose power and influence even pervades Mongolia. Shugden practitioners suffer discrimination and segregation. They live in fear for themselves and their families. Some have been threatened, physically harmed, and even killed. Why? Simply because they would not give up their religious freedom to practice Dorje Shugden. I'd like to play a short video just to illustrate some of these points. And to show really that the Dalai Lama's role in this suffering.
This is not religion. This is worship of spirit. So that's wrong.
Must have religious freedom.
At first glance, nothing distinguishes this Buddhist monk from another one. Vernon is a Shugden monk. Since the past 2 months, in this village of Tibetan refugees in South India, all doors have been closed to him and to all the members of his community.
Look what's written here.
Shugden worshippers cannot enter. They are banned from entering not only shops, but also public institutions. It's apartheid on Buddhist land.
Yeah, you see this one.
What is it?
This is oil. So if you don't take oil, don't come in this hospital.
Monks are forced to take an oath saying that they do not follow Shugden and have no contact with any Shugden devotees. Loyal to Shugden were expelled from monasteries.
Aren't you ashamed to bring us such trouble? Get them to go. Get rid of them.
A few weeks after the Dalai Lama's speech, Shugden monks could no longer enter monasteries. They were to remove themselves away from the monastery. Henceforth, they would be regarded as rebels, traitors who turned their backs on their master.
Geshe Lobsang Donden, 72 years old.
On the one hand, we cannot speak with the Dalai Lama. On the other hand, we have no choice but to act against his words. I keep thinking, if only I were already dead.
Recently, I've come to know that religion is no more birth freedom. We've been given two choices of either worshipping His Holiness the Dalai Lama or the deity Dorje Shugden. If we choose deity Dorje Shugden, we are treated as outcasts. In India, outcast is treated as the worst punishment for a person that you can ever give.
There are 20 people that are listed in the administration's website. Past, they put a list of hit people and they destroy them, lost them, and even they murdered.
Followers keep posting denunciations on public walls. They denounce the worshippers of this deity, giving name, address, and often detailed information about its followers and their whereabouts. Why don't you simply advise people not to worship the deity Dorje Shugden and instruct others to be tolerant and avoid violence against those who continue to worship it?
Anyone who's against the Dalai Lama must be opposed without hesitation with men, money, and possessions. That is to say, by all means, including violence.
Nobody has want them.
But I've seen the calls for violence in the newspaper.
No.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
No. I think rumors.
And what they're trying to do is intimidate people who stand up to them.
This is my wife's name. The names of all my children are listed, including concrete information on what school they attend. These wanted posters have been posted everywhere. I assume this is meant as encouragement to kill us. One can't simply wipe away devotion to this deity. Our fathers and our mothers died. The Chinese killed them. Though this was terrible, it didn't strike our innermost being. This ban, however, stabs us right in our hearts.
The Shugden family was literally chased out of their residential area. About 100 people attacked us. Had we gone out of our house, they definitely would have killed us. Fanatical followers of the Dalai Lama tried to burn down this family's house. They broke into our house and destroyed everything. Only few victims are willing to speak out against this persecution.
They have made separate rules for us. They said that no one is supposed to talk to us, and no one is supposed to have any contact with us.
It occurred to me, and I took some notes. Okay, so on Kelsang Rapten, he regards the idea that the worship of Dorje Shugden is harmful to Dalai Lama's life as implausible. And I think it's just important to note that in a traditional Tibetan Buddhist context, there's nothing implausible about that. You know, the 5th Dalai Lama would use tantric rituals as a military, technique against his enemies. In addition to things like armies and the traditional, military technologies, he also used tantric rituals. So, if a tantric ritual is capable of killing Mongols, it's probably also capable of harming the life of the Dalai Lama. So I find nothing, I may find something implausible about that, but if I do it as a kind of Western empirical viewpoint, but from a traditional viewpoint, there's nothing implausible about that. Yeah, and then I think that although the Dalai Lama may have said that the propitiation of Dorje Shugden is sort of bad for the cause, I sometimes felt like he was characterizing that position as it's Dorje Shugden's fault that that China annexed Tibet. And I think that that's a bit a bit of overplaying. Certainly, the Dalai Lama must think that there was something to do with the People's Liberation Army and Mao Zedong, and these may have also factored into the annexation of Tibet by China. So, turning to Geshe Tashi Tsering's talk, the point that in the writings of Tsongkhapa and Keduk and so on, Dorje Shugden is not mentioned is, of course, the case because Dorje Shugden sort of hadn't been invented yet. Yeah, I mean, some people may take issue with this term, invented, but in any case, the propitiation of Dorje Shugden hadn't been introduced into the kind of ritual repertoire of the Gaelic school. That doesn't necessarily have any bearing on the orthodoxy or status of the practice in later times. And by way of analogy, I would say if you look at the writings of sort of some, Thomas Aquinas. If you look at the writings of Thomas Aquinas, there'll be no mention of Our Lady of Fatima. Well, that doesn't mean that Our Lady of Fatima is some kind of worldly spirit who's doing evil. It just means that history moves forward. Yeah. I thought it was very interesting to hear this list of people in the past who had thought the propitiation of Dorje Shugden was problematic. But I think also that can be overemphasized. We saw from Martin's presentation, and then also in Thierry's that, let's say before the 1970s within the Gaelic school, it's certainly the case that the practice of Dorje Shugden was seen as far less problematic than it is now seen. Yeah. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And then I also wanted to mention that several of the presentations hit or touched upon the origin of the figure of Dorje Shugden and the death of Parkwa Gyaltsen. I just want to point out that in terms of Tibetan studies, that story is seen as somewhat, let's say, maybe not. It may be that that's a story that only we can only have evidence of long after the events that are being described, and there are other explanations for how the propitiation of Dorje Shugden was introduced into the Gaelic school. So turning to Carol's talk, to the extent that Carol's talk was about our personal experience, there's far less to say about it. I found sort of one theme interesting with sort of 2 points, which is the question of kind of continuity versus change. So on the one hand, it sounds like the kind of ritual program within an NKT center is actually quite different from let's say, a traditional Gaelic ritual program as it might have been seen, let's say, in Lhasa in the 1940s. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything. As I said, things change. But it seems a bit to contrast with this sort of kind of claim to orthodoxy, and just the name New Kadampa is definitely sort of playing towards orthodoxy, and yet in certain ways Geshe Kelsang Gyatso is willing to innovate in terms of the ritual program. So that's interesting. And then, but the other thing I noticed is some of the things she picked up as problematic, like, you know, sort of putting your teacher in your heart, the vow of Samaya, where you see your teacher is doing no wrong, the question of accumulation of merit, and teaching in particular accumulating merit. These are all, you know, completely standard things in Tibetan Buddhism, which is not to say that they may not have been misused. Of course, tantric practice is seen as very powerful for leading to enlightenment, but of course also, you know, traditional teachers will tell you it's very dangerous. But I just wanted to emphasize to people who may not have context that many of these things she was mentioning are quite common, including something like the fear of hell, and then also sexual misconduct or sexual harassment is very well known in other Tibetan Buddhist schools. So, you know, it's important maybe just not to overstate how unique that situation might be. Turning to Martin's presentation, I hope we'll get to see the end of it in his 5 minutes. I found it maybe the most informative in a sense in terms of showing us what was the propitiation of Dorje Shugden like sort of before the flaring up of this controversy in a traditional setting. And it is clear that, let's say, for at least in that monastery in Ladakh, in the early 1990s, this was just a normal part of the ritual program and was unproblematic. So then on Thierry's talk, I thought it was important, he emphasized the 5th Dalai Lama and the 5th Dalai Lama's use of Nyingma ritual practices, and I was trying to keep my comments at the beginning short. I do think this is an important observation, and that the 14th Dalai Lama is quite interested in kind of recalling the memory of the 5th and the sort of ritual decisions of the 5th, and if you like, the ecumenicism of the 5th. You know, the 5th is a very famous, very powerful guy, so if you kind of act like the 5th, that's going to give you a certain amount of credentials. And to some extent, what's interesting to me is that although the institution of the Dalai Lama and the hierarchy of the Gelug Church are, you know, extremely intertwined and have been for a long time, to some extent one can recognize the Dalai Lama as an independent institution and has its own kind of ritual interests and legitimacy interests that to some extent can be isolated from those of the Gelug hierarchy. And I agree with him certainly by saying that no controversy is black and white. Turning to the last presentation, the question of whether Dorje Shugden is a spirit or an enlightened being gets a lot of air. I think it's important to use the Tibetan terms in these contexts because using English can exaggerate the seeming differences. And I think that Martin's talk pointed to this. And then I also think it's important to recognize that whether a particular entity is a worldly spirit or a fully enlightened Buddha is not a question that is amenable to empirical verification. I also thought that certain statements he made were a bit exaggerated, such as Buddhism. The Buddhist world is divided. You know, certainly in Thailand and Sri Lanka, and no one cares about it. And in fact, you know, also the kind of innovativeness of this schism. You know, there's a schism in the Karmakagyu sect as well. There was a civil war between, you know, the Prince of Tsang and the 5th Dalai Lama. Violence and schism and divisiveness is a hoary tradition in Tibetan Buddhism, and that should be, you know, also kept in mind. And I think to some extent both sides of this debate kind of overplay its significance because they're coming at the world from a Gelug perspective, and as a non-Gelug, you know, I want to make that point. Nonetheless,
made was that there is no way to determine whether a certain entity is an enlightened one or a non-enlightened one. At the end of the day, that's a question of belief. Geshe Tashi cited various sources. We would contest those sources. Some of them he said was a fact. We would say categorically are not fact. For example, I think he quoted the Ganden Trikpa Nawang Shugden saying that he was against Dorje Shugden. In his biography, that isn't mentioned. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is we could argue that forever. One of the things that became very clear is that there is within the Gelugpa tradition a very clear lineage of relying upon Dorje Shugden that was held by Kyabdo Chuden Rinpoche, one of the most highly regarded Gelugpa Lamas, by his Lama, Bongka Rinpoche, and it would seem completely reasonable for that Gelugpa lineage to be able to continue within the Gelugpa monasteries. We would feel that for anyone to say those people are unacceptable within our monasteries, who has the authority to do that? The Dalai Lama certainly doesn't have the authority to do that. He's not the head of the Gelugpa lineage. Some people would say, well, the Ganden Trikpa has that authority, but the Ganden Trikpa is just appointed by the Dalai Lama, so he doesn't really have any power. One of the points Geshe Tashi mentioned was about the 101st Ganden Trikpa, suggesting that he had lied, which I see that situation in a very different way. Like, in order for him to help his students, in order to promote his teaching, he had to pretend, he had to hide. That's a horrible state of affairs, where someone has to hide their faith, when it's the faith, the practices that their own teacher has given them. Something that through their own experience they know is bringing them tremendous benefit. Maybe, you know, I don't know whether it's useful to go through these things, but possibly. Geshe Tashi said there's no scriptural reference within Je Tsongkhapa's teachings for reliance upon Dorje Shugden. Nathan made the point, well, of course not, because Dorje Shugden didn't appear until many hundreds of years later. We would say, as Dorje Shugden practitioners, that by his example, Je Tsongkhapa was relying upon Dorje Shugden because he had Dortsen Dragpa Gyaltsen as his main assistant in establishing his monasteries and helping him produce his texts and so forth. So for us, Dortsen Dragpa Gyaltsen is Dorje Shugden. So there's a very clear example of him relying upon Dorje Shugden in his lifetime. The notion that because Dorje Shugden isn't mentioned in Je Tsongkhapa's text, therefore he's not a suitable protector for Gelugpas. Pauden Lama. Je Tsongkhapa never relied upon Pauden Lama. That's an invention that came later. But the Dalai Lama relies upon Pauden Lama. Is that not okay? What else do we have? So then the quotes he listed, these various scriptural authorities, they're disputed. You can look on the internet, you'll find scholars from the Dorje Shugden side disputing those quotes. It doesn't prove anything. We have our sources, you have your sources. Why not just let us believe and practice what we want and allow within the Gelugpa monasteries that very clear tradition of Gelugpa to continue? Why throw it out? How is that acceptable? Again, you know, the question of Bongka Rinpoche's activities, that is highly disputed. Previously, that was not an accepted history. It was a certain group of people said he did those things. The majority of people didn't believe that. Nowadays, obviously, history is written by the victors. The Dalai Lama is now seemingly against Bongka Rinpoche, and what is history is changing. You can read Geshe Lundra Tsopa's autobiography. He was alive at the time of Bongka. He was alive during the time these supposed events are happening. He says the opposite was happening. He said Bongka Rinpoche was just a very inspiring teacher. These slanders of him are completely unjust. He's a living testimony of having been there at that time. Geshe Tashi, again, he mentioned violence, he mentioned murders. No one's been convicted of those murders. And yet, repeatedly, again and again and again, this slander is brought forward. Surely people have a right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. No one has been convicted. And yet, again and again, there's this slander. How is that reasonable? And then maybe finally, if I have enough time, Martin made the point. If I can remember rightly, was that the Lama is higher than the deity. Very beautiful. In the Dalai Lama's own explanation of how he came to the conclusion that Dorje Shugden was not a reliable protector, he says the principal sources of this matter have been derived from Dobal divinations conducted before Lama and the decrees of the Dharma protector, Dorje Dragten Nechum, as opposed to what his teacher, Chögyam Rinpoche, said.
His Holiness Dalai Lama never banned practicing this controversial Dharma protector. he strongly encouraged people not to practice, particularly people who want to come to his teachings. That's what how he stands. That's his position. Quite often they use ban. That's they want to people believe. Dalai Lama ban. Never. And particularly the Khalsang, he quoted few saying, "Oh, look at the Dalai Lama's website." Actual quotation makes from Tibetan Youth Conference, Youth Organization's statement, not the Dalai Lama's statements. He quoted twice, saying, "Oh, Dalai Lama's." Actual quotation, he said, comes from Tibetan Youth Congress, and that is the fact. Quite often, he is the person, Khalsang, he presents this called ISC News Agent. I'll give you an example, just a small example, how he distorts the facts. In just July, I think that July 14th, I think that's the case. Sorry, my notes are a little bit distorted. Yeah. July, the 19th of July, he presented this, I think, the 10 or 15 minutes program in that ISC News. What he said, Dalai Lama claims his teacher, Trijang Rinpoche, Trijang Dorje, encouraged him to abandon practicing Dorje Shugden. That's what he said. Dalai Lama never ever said Dalai Lama encouraged his tutor, Trijang Rinpoche, encouraged him to abandon. That's not the case. But in fact, what he's doing is he presents that, but also at the same time he shows as evidence is this, what His Holiness Dalai Lama's website said. That's what he showed in the screen. His Holiness Dalai Lama renounced practice in 1975 after discovering the profound historical, social, and religious problems associated with it. He did so with the full knowledge and support of his junior tutor. So what Khalsang did, support, that word, English word support, he twisted into saying encourage. These two words have totally different meaning. What His Holiness Dalai Lama is saying, after his long-term observation on this issue, historically in many different ways, he reached the decision he's not going to worship this spirit anymore. Therefore, he consulted his senior tutor as well as his junior tutor, Trijang Rinpoche. That moment, Trijang Rinpoche supported, not encouraged. That's a distortion. There are many other that kind of distortions. As one of the other previous speakers said, oh yes, they banned it and show some kind of dramatic picture. They never show those 3 monks killed in Dharamsala. Must show those two, get a good balance. Fact must show the facts. It's much better than distortion. Then somebody, you talk about international amnesty. International amnesty's position on allegation abuse against worships of Tibetan deity Dorje Shugden, June 1998. Now the International Amnesty said this. None of the material International Amnesty International has received contains evidence of abuses which fall within the Amnesty International mandate for actions such as grave violations of fundamental human rights. That is Amnesty International's reports, June 1998. That's the fact. Now, I want to say just a few words. Somebody said, why they didn't quote those murderers? Of course, those out of the local Indian police, they identified 4. Sorry, they all escaped to in China. China protecting them. That's how.
That's that I said at the end of the talk, a lot of the Ladakis were unhappy with what was at the time the Shugden supporters community activity. Let me be very clear as to what they meant about that. Their view, and this was the general Ladakhi view, was that monasteries, and this is a standard Tibetan view, monasteries are autonomous in their decision-making processes. There is no vow of obedience in Tibetan Buddhism. And in that sense, you're quite correct when you said earlier, sorry to speak to you directly here, that the Dalai Lama does not have authority to ban the worship of Shugden in monasteries. Now, from the Ladakhi perspective, in 1998, they were sitting there going, we're all holding our breath. And what we don't want is for the ban to come here, because it's a Tibetan political issue. It's not for Ladakis. We don't need to make this distinction. What they felt was by 2003 was that the issue had been so internationally polarized into Shugden Paz versus Dalai Lama Paz and everything on those lines that they had to make a call. And because Lama Yoga, because the Lama is higher than the gods, because Shugden was, from their perspective, a worldly protector, whereas the Dalai Lama was a Lama, there was no decision to be made. And actually most, as you know, you can find this on the web, I covered it in greater detail, but never mind. The Ladakhi monks themselves went out of their way to remove the statues themselves of Shugden. It wasn't kind of people coming in from the outside. Actually, they desperately asked people to come in from the outside. They asked Ngari Rinpoche to come along. The Rangdung monks went to Likir and said, please, 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 come to Rangdung so that we can get rid of it. And he actually, they brought a letter to him, and he ripped the letter up and said, you monks, you want to do this? Do it yourself. Which they did. So I think this issue about the autonomy of monasteries is important here. The second point is, I'm going to reiterate Nathan's point. Protected deities are political. They have been in Tibetan history forever. They are constitutional entities. Protected deities were regularly and systematically used in warfare. They were used against the British in 1886. Unfortunately, the British had Bren guns. Consequently, that was why many of the Tibetans, after being wiped out by the British, decided that Queen Victoria must be a manifestation of the protected deity Palwan Hummel. Because she's obviously got some serious firepower on this. These things have always been deeply political, and that's a problem. And it's a problem when we say, ooh, we think that religion shouldn't be involved. That's a cultural clash. Okay, I said I'd say what my opinion was. And this, so just to finish up, this is what I meant when I said that in some crucial sense, from the perspective of those who are supporting Shugden, the internationalization, the very substantial polarization that has occurred, that now characterizes the international field of this debate, that radical polarization meant that the Ladakis got rid of Shugden. Now this is important because, honest to God, this is like watching my parents divorce. You know, what starts as one little problem eventually becomes everything. It divides people completely. And it's about what people did in the past and what this history was and what Lama said about this, that and the other. The question is actually, we have got the situation, next slide please. We've got to this situation. We've got to the situation where in 2008, down in Nottingham, I remember a woman walking past the Shugden practitioners who were doing it, and she went, religious. They're packing nutters, doesn't mean that it didn't matter whether they're Buddhist or Muslim or whatever, they're all nutters. We've got to the situation where the Central Tibetan administration is putting this kind of list up. This is rubbish, all of it. Let me be precise here. The manner in which this dispute has been carried out by both sides Yeah, no, I'm going to finish the sentence on this one. The manner in which this dispute has been carried out on both sides has been counterproductive to the goals of both. We need to think better than this.
Martin has put it all to the point. Again, we hear about bans, but I've not read a ban. I've not seen it. We hear about excessive reactions. Nobody doubts there have been excessive reactions. And Martin gave some example. But what I'm missing a little bit is the essence of it. As Martin showed in the case of the Balaki monastery, and this is not only in the Balaki monastery, but generally in the region which were Gelugpas, it is true, Shugden worship had become a very normal, usual thing. Nobody reflected much about it. Well, some people, most people did. But it still is a fact that at the beginning, the whole point of the introduction of the Shugden worship, the whole dispute between people who are in favor of the policy of the 5th Dalai Lama and people who are against, this was about divisiveness and authority. This was about to make a difference between the pure teachings and those which were perverted by other schools. So, if we say that the Buddhist world is being divided, well, first it's not the Buddhist world who say that. I think it was Nathan who said, well, it's not the Buddhist world, it's the small Gelugpa world. Let's be correct about that. And it's been yes, of course, when there is a dispute, people are divided, and that's normal. It's what happens in every society, and it happens in the field of religion, as we know. The religion is not only exception, so it's about the rule and exception that happens in religious world, in religious things. But the point of dispute is about the question whether there is a school or a tendency or a lineage even within Tibetan Buddhism which is superior, not superior, sorry, more pure than others. It is not for me to decide whether it is so or not. I have to study that from outside, right? But at the moment when you take this discourse, we are representing the right. Of course, it's more the rule than the exception in the world of religions. But that's always a problem everywhere. So we have to see that the whole Shugden issue from the basis, from the very first day, is all about that. Who belongs to us is on the side of the pures, and who doesn't is not. And this is the divisive discourse, I'm very sorry. And if you have a divisive discourse, if you have divisive practice, and it goes into politics, and into how the government is run, and who, in the time of the exile, who's been sent to Switzerland from Dharamsala. They're all people who were from the relatively circles. Why? Because those who were taking the decision were all belonging to the Shugden group. So you see, these things, which and that has nothing to do with religion anymore, of course. This is a purely political, sociological issue. But this is linked from the start. And of course, when religious authority like the Dalai Lama, now you may think he's right, you may think he's wrong, but he's an authority. And if he says, I don't agree with that, then every Tibetan, at least among the Gelugpas who are concerned directly, will have to take a position. Well, I agree with the Dalai Lama or I don't. And if they don't, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's all right. And of course, they should not be came to be damaged because of that. But again, we hear about people being killed, we learn about terrible things happening. We hear about that, but I haven't seen much evidence of it. I've heard and I've seen things which I think were not very nice. Martin was speaking about the list which was published on CTS website. We've seen some not very nice words being written at, what was that, a shop or something like this, that people Turkish religion, this is not nice. And it's certainly not in the sense of Tibetan Buddhism, of the essence of Tibetan Buddhism. But this is not Tibetan Buddhism, these people. And who sits in a glass house should not throw his talk, isn't it? Okay, there will be more to say about
maybe another time. The Dalai Lama's ban is a denial of religious freedom. And it's a denial of human rights. It's causing immense human suffering, and it's not necessary. It has no beneficial result. It is destroying Buddhism. The Dalai Lama often says there is no ban, but this is not true. There is a ban, and he has caused it through his power and influence. He sometimes says that no one's being harmed by the ban, that it is just rumour. But this is not true. There is segregation, apartheid, and very widespread suffering. Because of his reputation, people everywhere believe whatever the Dalai Lama says. When the international Shugden community organised demonstrations against the Dalai Lama in Europe this year, during his visit to Italy, for instance, the Italian police forces were on high alert. Why? Because the Dalai Lama's office had told the mayor of the Italian city that we were dangerous criminals and terrorists. During the demonstrations, the police realised that we were not at all dangerous. Far from it. They clearly understood that although our protests were very loud and sustained, we were in fact very peaceful, disciplined and good-natured. During his US and European tours this year, the Dalai Lama's security photographed Tibetan Shugden demonstrators and posted the names and photographs of 34 of them on the CTA website, stating, and this was just yesterday, that they have a history of violence, including murder, physical assault and arson. Because of many false accusations against Shugden protesters by the Dalai Lama and the CTA, we are regarded as criminals, and people are afraid of us. But we're not bad people. We're not evil. We're not extreme. We criticise the Dalai Lama only because we have no choice. We have no other way to stop the persecution and suffering that he has caused. The source of all this persecution, discrimination and suffering within the Tibetan exile communities and beyond, from 1996 up to the present day, is the Dalai Lama. If you really want to help him, you should ask the Dalai Lama to change himself. If you really want,
please not make audible, comment. Well, even if it's a laugh or something, it's quite disrespectful.
Are we stopping the process? Yeah. I'll probably be done for this one. Yeah. We criticise the Dalai Lama only because we have no choice, as I say. We have no other way to stop the persecution and suffering that he's caused. The source of all this persecution and suffering, so what was I saying? If you really want to help him, if you really want to save and protect the Dalai Lama's reputation, you should ask the Dalai Lama to change himself. Because the source of this problem is himself. Please, if we want to solve this problem, please use your influence to ask the Dalai Lama to do these 4 things to solve the problem. 1. Allow anyone who wishes to practice Dorje Shugden the freedom to do so. 2. Stop completely the discrimination against Shugden practitioners. 3. Allow all Shugden monks and nuns who have been expelled to return to their monasteries and nunneries, and to receive the same material and spiritual rights as non-Shugden practitioners. And 4. Write. Dalai Lama should write to the Tibetan communities throughout the world that they should apply practically these 3 points. These 4 points are in this leaflet. If the Dalai Lama does these 4 things, the problem will be quickly solved. The Tibetan people will be reunited, harmony between Buddhist traditions will be restored, and his own reputation will be saved. The only way to solve this problem, is for the Dalai Lama to change himself. Please use your beneficial influence to help the Dalai Lama to change himself by accepting the 4 points in this leaflet.